The blue in these mountains is manufactured by the trees themselves. The most famous wilderness here had to be emptied of 500 families before it could look wild. And one low ridge produces lights that have survived 2 federal investigations. Most people drive the parkway, photograph one overlook, and think they've seen the Blue Ridge. They've seen the postcard. And by the time we reach number 1, you'll be standing at a dark railing watching the one thing in these mountains that nobody, not the government, not the cameras, has ever fully explained. Number 18. The mountains, older than the ocean. Start with the age problem. These gentle, rounded mountains are older than the ocean they drain into. Grandfather Mountain rises to 5,946 feet near Linville, North Carolina, and the famous version is a family attraction, a mile-high swinging bridge, a wildlife habitat, a gift shop at the bottom. But stand on that bridge with the wind coming through, and the rock under your boots is more than 1 billion years old. Geologists reading these basement layers reconstruct a range that once stood at Rocky's scale, possibly Himalayan scale, around 300 million years ago, when Africa collided with North America and shoved this crust into the sky. The Atlantic didn't open until roughly 200 million years ago. Think about that. The mountains watched the sea arrive. Those ancient heights are reconstructions, not measurements. Nobody photographed that skyline. But the mineral evidence is not in serious dispute. What tourists read as gentleness, geologists read as erosion on a scale the human brain isn't built for. The softness of the Blue Ridge is not modesty. It's what deep time looks like when it wins. Number 17. The rainforest in the wrong place. There is a rainforest in these mountains, and it is not a metaphor. Along the Blue Ridge escarpment around Brevard and Highlands, North Carolina, moist air pushing up from the Gulf slams into a 2,000-foot wall of rock and unloads 80 to 100 inches of rain a year in places, which qualifies parts of this region as temperate rainforest by most ecological definitions, even if no park sign says so. Transylvania County calls itself the land of waterfalls and claims more than 250 of them. Visitors treat those falls as separate attractions. Drive to Looking Glass, photograph it. Drive to Whitewater, photograph that. But the waterfalls aren't attractions. They're symptoms. Walk any trail here, and the evidence surrounds you. Moss on every surface, fog that never fully commits to leaving, the sound of water arriving before the water does. The density of falls exists because the entire escarpment is a rain machine running year-round. Tourists collect the waterfalls one by one. The mountain makes them wholesale. Number 16. The tunnel dug by hand. Afton Mountain to most Virginians means fog warnings on Interstate 64. Underneath the interstate sits the older, harder crossing. In 1858, engineer Claudius Crozet completed a railroad tunnel through the mountain at Rockfish Gap in Virginia. About 4,270 feet of bore, the longest tunnel in America at its completion. It was cut with black powder and hand drills, mostly by Irish immigrant laborers, alongside enslaved workers, through rock that resisted every foot. A cholera outbreak swept the camps mid-construction. The railroad abandoned the tunnel in 1944 when a newer bore opened beside it. And then it simply sat inside the mountain, sealed and forgotten, for 3/4 of a century. Walk into it today. It reopened as a public trail in 2020. The temperature drops, the walls go from brick to raw stone, and the entrance behind you shrinks to a coin of daylight. The mountain was conquered twice. Once with modern machinery and a budget, once with blistered hands. Only one of those crossings can you now walk through in the dark. Number 15. The town with an expiration date. There's a vacation town inside a national park, and nobody has vacationed there in decades. Elkmont sits in the Tennessee Smokies, at the southern end of the Blue Ridge province, a lane of cottages called Daisytown, built by Knoxville's Appalachian Club, set in the early 20th century. The park's founding story says wilderness was set aside here in 1934. The fine print says the wilderness came with lifetime leases. Wealthy cottage owners negotiated the right to stay, and some leases ran all the way to 1992. Then the leases expired, the owners left, and the Park Service mostly let the buildings rot, preserving a handful, watching the rest sag. Walk the lane now, screen doors intact, porches folding slowly toward the ground. A paved road serving houses that will never be occupied again. It isn't a ghost town born of failure, no mine closed, no crop died. It's a ghost town by expiration date, abandoned on schedule, by contract. Remember this quiet little street. It returns later in this countdown, and not for its architecture. 4 entries in, everything so far can still be touched. Billion-year rock, waterfall spray, tunnel brick, cabin porches. That layer is thinning. What comes next was carved, killed, measured, or removed. And the thing waiting at the end of this list can't be touched at all. Number 14. The rock no one can read. The densest carved message in North Carolina sits in a field near Cullowhee, and no living person can read it. Judaculla Rock is a soapstone boulder covered in more than 1,500 petroglyphs, cupels, lines, figures, shapes that surface best at dusk when raking light pulls them out of the flat, gray stone. Archaeologists can date the tool marks, roughly. The carving likely began in the late Archaic period and may have continued for thousands of years, layer over layer, beside quarry scars where earlier people cut soapstone bowls from the outcrop. What they cannot do is translate it. Cherokee tradition ties the rock to Tzulkalu, Judaculla, the slant-eyed giant who leapt from his mountain and landed here, leaving his marks in the stone. That framework predates every academic one, and it remains the only complete account anyone has. Everything else is inventory. How many carvings? How deep? How old? It may be the oldest text in these mountains. And it's the one stop on this list where the answer never arrives, because the meaning was never handed to the people doing the measuring. Number 13. The forest that vanished. The dominant tree of these mountains is missing, and the forest in your photographs is the replacement. A century ago, the American chestnut made up roughly a quarter of the canopy across the Blue Ridge, trunks wider than doorways, crowns that turned whole ridge lines cream white in early summer. Mountain families built their year around it. Hogs fattened on the nutfall, cash hauled to town by the wagon load, cabins and fences and coffins cut from its rot-resistant wood. Then a fungal blight arrived on imported Asian trees, was detected in New York in 1904, and moved south like weather. By mid-century, it had killed an estimated 3 to 4 billion chestnuts. Sit with that number for a second. The oak-dominated slopes you see today look ancient and original. They are a substitution less than 100 years old, and the roots refuse to finish dying. Sprouts still rise from old stumps across these mountains. The blight cuts them down before they mature, and breeding programs keep working toward a resistant tree. Whether that recovery ever happens is genuinely undecided. Until then, every unchanged ridge view is a photograph of an aftermath. Number 12. The grave on the roof of the east. The highest point east of the Mississippi is also a tomb, and the man inside it died defending the number on the sign. Mount Mitchell tops out at 6,684 feet in North Carolina's Black Mountains, a spur that outgrew the main Blue Ridge crest. In the 1850s, Elisha Mitchell's measurements of the peak collided with the claims of Senator Thomas Clingman, a public, printed, increasingly personal feud over whose mountain stood highest. In 1857, Mitchell went back into the Blacks to verify his own numbers and fell to his death at a waterfall along the route. The following year, he was buried at the summit. The mountain that killed him now carries his name and holds his body. Stand at the observation deck and the victory looks complicated. The grave a few steps away, and around it a forest of gray snags, Fraser firs killed by an imported insect on slopes already stressed by decades of acid deposition. The East's highest point is an elevation marker, a headstone, and a sick forest sharing 1 acre of cloud. Number 11. The wilderness. They emptied first. The most photographed wilderness in Virginia was inhabited within living memory, and it was cleared on purpose. Shenandoah National Park runs along the Blue Ridge crest, its overlooks strung along Skyline Drive like a highlight reel of untouched Appalachia. Step off almost any trail into the hollows below, though, and the woods start producing evidence. A standing chimney, a stone wall running through mature forest, a family cemetery that still receives flowers. When the park was assembled in the 1930s, Virginia condemned the land of roughly 500 families and removed them. Some willingly, some not. A few elderly residents granted lifetime tenancy so they could die where they were born. The publicity of the era painted those residents as isolated mountaineers in need of rescue, a caricature that made the removal easier to sell and has distorted their memory ever since. Their descendants still hold access rights to the cemeteries, so the famous overlooks frame an emptiness that was manufactured, one condemnation at a time. The chimneys in the trees are the receipts. Notice what just happened. The countdown crossed from places to people. The early entries corrected the scenery. That one corrected the story. What remains wasn't overlooked so much as rewritten, flooded, bought back, or left uncounted. And one phenomenon out here never got rewritten at all, because nobody has finished the first draft. Number 10. The road that ends in a promise. A federal road north of Bryson City, North Carolina, runs 6 smooth miles into the Smokies, enters a clean concrete tunnel, and stops. Permanently. Locals call it the Road to Nowhere, which makes it sound like a quirky photo stop. And plenty of visitors treat it that way, drive the pavement, walk the tunnel, come out the far side onto Bear Trail, turn around. But this road is a legal document written in asphalt. In 1943, the federal government promised Swain County a replacement route along the north shore of a new reservoir. Restoring access to lands and family cemeteries, the rising water was about to cut off. Construction started, stalled on cost and environmental problems, and never resumed. The argument ran for decades, until Washington agreed in 2010 to settle the promise with $52 million in cash instead of pavement. The last of it paid out in 2018. The tunnel isn't unfinished infrastructure. It's the period at the end of a 75-year argument, which leaves the question the road was built to answer in the first place. What water? And whose graves? Let me say one thing here, and then I won't bring it up again. The files that wouldn't fit in this countdown, the longer investigations, the ones that run deeper than a list allows, I've gathered into a book called The Appalachian Mysteries Collection. The link is in the description. If you want it, it's there, that's all. Now, the water and the graves. Number 9, the towns beneath the lake. The water is Fontana Lake, and the graves belong to towns that no longer exist above its surface. In 1944, the Tennessee Valley Authority finished Fontana Dam, 480 feet of wartime concrete, still the tallest dam east of the Rockies, to power aluminum production for the war effort. The rising Little Tennessee swallowed the valley communities. Judson, Bushnell, Forney, and up Hazel Creek, the lumber town of Proctor. Families were bought out and scattered. The cemeteries stayed on the slopes above the waterline. Today, Fontana means houseboats, kayak rentals, and dam selfies. And none of that is a lie. It's just the top layer. Because every year, the Park Service runs boats across the lake for Decoration Day, ferrying descendants, flowers in hand, to tend graves on hillsides that once overlooked their homes and now overlook water. Picture that crossing. A boatload of families headed to a cemetery you can only reach by leaving the modern map entirely. The recreation floats on relocation. The lake's calm surface is the most photographed lid in the region. Number 8, the mother town that never left. The mother town of an entire nation sits beside a state highway, and most drivers read it as a field. Kituwa occupies a bottomland along the Tuckasegee River just outside Bryson City, a low mound in open ground flattened by a century of plowing, still unmistakably there if you know what you're looking at. In Cherokee tradition, this is the mother town, the original settlement from which the others descend, the center of the map. The tourist version of Cherokee country is the casino, the strip of shops, and the outsider assumption that the story here belongs in the past tense. The past never vacated. In 1996, the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians bought Kituwa back, roughly 309 acres, returning the site to the nation it had anchored for centuries. It isn't a museum, and it isn't a reenactment. It hosts ceremony, community gatherings, and the work of keeping the Cherokee language alive, a functioning institution on the oldest address in these mountains. Outsiders keep asking what happened to the Cherokee. The Cherokee bought back the answer. Number 7, the salamander capital of Earth. These mountains hold a global superlative, and it lives under wet rocks. The Southern Appalachians are the salamander capital of the world, the richest diversity of these amphibians anywhere on the planet, with more than 30 species in the Smokies alone, and dozens more scattered through the gorges and coves of the surrounding Blue Ridge. Visitors chase bears and elk. The actual world record wildlife is underfoot, ignored. Flip a streamside stone at night with a headlamp and the record looks back at you. Orange skin, black skin, skin nearly translucent. Most of these species are lungless. They breathe entirely through their skin, which chains them to cold, clean, permanently wet ground, and helps explain why single gorges here hold species found nowhere else on Earth. The bigger streams hold hellbenders, aquatic giants pushing 2 feet long. And the count isn't finished. New species are still being formally described, some confined to a single drainage or one mountainside. The Blue Ridge's most extraordinary residents fit in your palm, hold a world title, and have never once appeared on a postcard. Tally the last stretch. Drowned, bought back, still being counted. The human map and the biological map are both incomplete. What's left can't be reached by road at all. It survives on summits, in herbarium drawers, and in the dark. From here, the certainty starts dropping. And the last entry on this list has been watched for 100 years and still files as unexplained. Number 6, the fireflies that keep time. Back to the dead resort town, because for 2 weeks a year, it hosts the strangest crowd in the park, and the crowd arrives after dark. Every June, over that same lane of expired cottages at Elkmont, thousands of fireflies of the species Photinus carolinus flash in unison, bursts of synchronized light, then coordinated blackness, then light again, rolling across the sagging porches like a signal. The synchrony is precise enough and rare enough that the Park Service controls access with an annual lottery. The mechanics are reasonably well understood. The males phase lock their flashes, and researchers model the hillside as a system of coupled oscillators, each insect adjusting to its neighbors until the whole slope finds the beat. What stays genuinely open is the evolutionary question, why full synchrony emerged here, and in only a handful of places on Earth, when most firefly species manage without it. The leaseholders never advertised any of this. The town died on schedule, by contract. The light show has never missed a season. Number 5, Canada stranded on the summits. The highest ridgelines here aren't the south at all. They're stranded Canada. Climb above roughly 5,500 feet on the Rhone Massif, the Blacks, the Balsams, or the Smokies crest, and you cross an invisible line. The hardwoods stop, red spruce and Fraser fir take over, and the air smells like a different latitude, Hikers say it feels like up north. That's not a comparison, it's the diagnosis. These forests are Ice Age relics, remnants of a cold climate ecosystem that spread across the region during the glaciations and retreated upslope as the world warmed roughly 10,000 years ago, until only the summits could still hold it. Biologists call them sky islands. The residents match the isolation. The spruce fir moss spider, an endangered relative of tarantulas, about the size of a BB, lives only in moss mats on a few of these peaks. The firs are being hammered by the same imported insect that killed the forest around Mitchell's grave. And the projections all point one way. Warming shrinks the islands, and there's no higher ground left to retreat to. The coldest views in the south belong to refugees, with a lease running out. Number 4. The flower lost for 90 years. Botanists spent most of a century hunting a single plant inside these mountains, working from a dead man's unlabeled note. In 1788, the French botanist André Michaux collected a small evergreen herb somewhere in the Carolina High Country, and the specimen ended up in Paris with no precise location attached. In 1842, Harvard's Asa Gray found it in the herbarium, named it Oconee Bells, and then spent decades trying to see it alive. Expeditions went out, expeditions came back empty. The mountains were considered thoroughly botanized by then, and they hid it anyway. In 1877, a teenager named George Hyams finally stumbled onto a colony in McDowell County, North Carolina, and the 90-year search ended by accident. The plant's real stronghold turned out to be the deep gorges of the Cherokee country along the escarpment. And here the story turns, because in the 1970s, reservoir construction flooded a large share of exactly that habitat. Science lost the flower for 90 years. Engineering drowned part of the refuge that hid it. In the gorges that remain, the flower keeps outliving its finders. Notice that everything so far had an ending, a settlement date, a rediscovery, a lottery, a law. The last 3 entries don't resolve. The shape of these summits, the color of the range, and the lights over one low ridge each carry a question researchers haven't closed, and the final one has outlasted 2 federal investigations. Number 3. The meadows no one planted. Treeless summits sit well below the tree line here, and after more than a century of study, science is still arguing about why. The Roan Highlands, on the North Carolina and Tennessee line, carry miles of open grass along their crest, Round Bald, Jane Bald, Grassy Ridge, and to the southwest, Max Patch lifts a bare dome above unbroken forest. Stand on any of them, and the problem surrounds you. 360 degrees of meadow, near 5,800 feet, while fully forested peaks of equal height stand in every direction. Trees grow fine at this elevation. They just don't grow here. The candidate explanations are real science, not folklore. Leftover Ice Age cold, grazing by extinct megafauna, burning by native peoples, then centuries of settler livestock, and each one explains some balds while failing on others. Decades in, no clean verdict, and the mystery has a second act. Whatever created the balds, nothing maintains them anymore. Left alone, the forest closes back in, so agencies now mow these summits by hand, and, on Roan, deploy a seasonal goat herd to preserve landscapes whose origin remains officially unresolved. The most beloved views in the range are artifacts we can't explain and can't stop tending. Number 2. The color the trees make. The name of this entire mountain range describes an exhalation, the signature look of the Blue Ridge, ridge lines stacked in deepening layers of blue, is the region's literal brand, printed on signs, license plates, and every souvenir in every fudge shop from earlier in this list. Most people assume the color is just distance and humidity, and that's partly true, but the specific blue has a biological source. These forests release enormous volumes of volatile compounds, And those molecules and the fine particles they form scatter the short blue wavelengths of light. The trees tint their own atmosphere. Then the 20th century nearly overrode it. Sulfate pollution drifting in from distant power plants pushed the blue toward gray-white smog, cutting visibility on bad days from a natural 90-plus miles down to a fraction of that. Picture the same overlook twice: a washed-out 1970s haze and a sharp modern October. After the Clean Air Act tightened, monitoring stations measured the recovery, visibility climbing, the blue returning, not through sentiment, but through regulation and instruments. The famous color is a living emission. We nearly erased it. The mountains are re-inking it. Number 1. The lights that beat the debunkers. And now the lights. Brown Mountain is, fittingly, the least dramatic landform on this entire list. A long, low ridge around 2,600 feet in Burke and Caldwell counties, North Carolina, rising over the Linville Gorge country, the kind of mountain you'd never photograph on purpose. Yet, for well over a century, people have stood at Wiseman's View and the pull-offs along Highway 181 and watched points of light rise over that ridge at night, hovering, drifting, cutting out over black terrain. The federal government investigated twice. The U.S. Geological Survey blamed train headlights in 1913, then broadened the verdict in 1922 to cars, fires, and distant lights refracting through humid valley air. As bulk explanations go, that one is reasonable, and modern work largely supports it. Researchers from Appalachian State running long-term cameras find that the overwhelming majority of sightings resolve into ordinary, identifiable lights. But the file leaks. Local accounts hold that the lights kept appearing after the 1916 flood knocked out the rail lines and the power, a reported detail, not a proven one, but a stubborn one. And, in the modern camera record, a small residue of captures still resists explanation, with ball lightning type mechanisms proposed and none confirmed. That's the honest state of it. Most sightings closed, a residue open, a century on the clock. After 17 entries of hidden systems, drowned maps, and unfinished inventories, the last secret of the Blue Ridge is one you can drive to, stand at a railing in the dark, and personally fail to explain. The postcard ends where the explanations do. The mountains keep going. The Blue Ridge on the postcard is real, but it's the thinnest version of the territory, because the actual map holds drowned towns, a reclaimed capital, meadows with no known author, a color we nearly lost, and a light nobody has closed the file on. So tell me in the comments about the road, ruin, ridge, or local place near you that outsiders drive past, misread, or can't explain, because those are the maps worth correcting next. And if you want more of the territory behind the postcard, subscribe and start with the investigation waiting on your screen right now.